Here's what's spoiled in this video. I show the Master Sword quest in Tears of the Kingdom as well as the lead up to the Wind Temple. I show many of the final scenes of The Last Guardian, though don't specifically discuss their plot significance. Also, this video is better on Nebula, and it's the only place you can watch its exclusive companion, which is a cooking video for some reason. Have fun! More than almost any game in recent memory, my playthrough of The Legend of Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom, was full of moments where I just stop and stare in astonishment at what the game was showing me. This may read as hyperbole to some. Tears of the Kingdom is a game not even running in 1080p, chugging along on 6-year-old hardware that was already technologically behind the alternatives in 2017. The textures of the game are iffy, the level of detail is simplistic, the frame rate is, 30. And I knew all that while I was playing, and somehow none of it stopped me from asking multiple times, is this the best looking game I've ever played? And thinking back, I always ask that question in one scenario. Tears of the Kingdom became that most beautiful game when Link was illuminated, enrobed, overwhelmed by the sun on the horizon. There's just something about the sun in this game, something about its implementation and the way it rolls over hills and grass and valleys that obliterates any technical shortcomings. For a game so distinctly unphotoreal, my notes on the light in Tears of the Kingdom could have been pulled from real-life wilderness, like how the horizon sears a line across the landscape just before dawn, or how the sun's first emergence is paired with the most fragile of pale blues on the other side of the sky. In the morning, backlit mountains turn shades of indigo to frame the landscape, and those same mountains fade like a burning ember in twilight. Clouds hold different characters when lit from above or below, and a thick rain or snowstorm can reduce the sun's visibility to a weak orange circle. In the evening, the sky burns with such fire that it begs you to stare into it, and in that blown-out horizon, it seems that the game's world might just go on forever. Tears of the Kingdom's skies are a staggering artistic work, one that I'm sure represents a triumph of programming and design within the game's engine. But the sun also feels so keenly observed and poetically true that I'm loath to give the computer-calculated parts of it too much credit. Lighting technology has been at the forefront of graphical advancement for years, on hardware platforms far more powerful than the Switch. Dazzling features like Cyberpunk 2077's path tracing, or even Fortnite's Lumen, bounce light around with increasingly complex realism. In comparison with these titles, there are parts of Zelda that are incredibly basic. I can only imagine the million shadows a bright blue seed would cast in RTX On world. And Cyberpunk and Fortnite, to their credit, are both really good-looking games. Fortnite? Who would have guessed? And their use of this lighting tech aims for a different artistic vision than Zelda. Night City is supposed to swim in darkness and neon. Fortnite wants to... I'm not sure, actually. Fortnite just wants to be everything to all people. But even though their tech is far more complex, maybe because they're so accurately tracing the rays from every source, their sense of light is less overwhelming. Their worlds just aren't built around the sun. Fortnite isn't sculpted around hitting you with the splendor of the natural world. But Tears of the Kingdom is. It is a game about vast expanses, not detailed interiors, about the raw power of light over technical accuracy. And as such, its painterly approach isn't just a graphical compromise when it comes to the sun, but a decision specifically made to provoke a sense of awe. Tears of the Kingdom is far from the first piece to be so singularly obsessed with this aesthetic. The history of the sun in art essentially traces the history of art itself. Its solar influences arguably the single most important contributor to our existence in the universe, let alone an inspiration for paintings and sculptures. But even within art, where could I possibly start? Cave paintings? Stonehenge? That scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark? If you'll forgive me, I'm going to zoom forward many thousand years, even leaving the lovely smiley face suns behind, and start with a man named Joseph Mallard William Turner. Turner is a seminal artist in the history of depicting the sun, and I want to explain how via the concept of varnishing days. In a recent essay, Matthias Kruger recounts that in the early 1800s, the public could visit a gallery and watch artists varnish their already painted works, essentially making the finishing coat into a performance. But Turner, who had an air of the dramatic, would take this opportunity to make significant alterations and adjustments to his paintings live in front of a crowd. There's an anecdote about Turner presenting a somewhat washed out seascape next to The Opening of Waterloo Bridge by John Constable. Waterloo Bridge is a significantly more complex and varied piece, but on Varnishing Day, Turner showed up and slapped a bright spot of red right onto the middle of his seascape. The brightness of the red, which Turner declared a buoy, reportedly made Constable's piece look weak in comparison. Constable, incensed, said Turner had come into the gallery and, quote, fired a gun. But Turner's near-impulsive adjustments to his paintings are most excitingly described within the context of his favorite subject, the sun. His piece, Regulus, references the story of a Roman general captured by Carthaginians and tortured by having his eyelids sewn open and forced to stare into the sun. Turner's painting doesn't depict this series of events, however. Instead, we, the viewer, are put in the position of Regulus himself, the light at the center of the frame pouring out in a deluge that saturates every other aspect of the piece. And, by all accounts, Regulus was barely the same painting before Varnishing Day. The artist John Gilbert watched Turner work and wrote breathlessly that he, quote, did not look about him, but kept on scumbling a lot of white into his picture, nearly all over it. The picture was a mass of red and yellow of all varieties. Every object was in this fiery state. He had a large palette, nothing in it but a huge lump of flake white. He had 2 or 3 biggish hog tools to work with, and with these he was driving the white into all the hollows and every part of the surface. The picture gradually became wonderfully effective, just the effect of brilliant sunlight absorbing everything and throwing a misty haze over every object. Standing sideways of the canvas, I saw that the sun was a lump of white standing out like the boss on a shield. Even more entertaining, a closer inspection of Regulus shows that the canvas is significantly torn right at the point of the sun's greatest impact, and stitched back together by Turner himself, as if the intensity of the light couldn't be contained on such a fragile material. Turner's suns were met with a mix of praise, scorn, and general bemusement from critics. My favorite writing about him sounds like warnings to the public. A newspaper in 1837 recommended the paintings be viewed from a safe distance. They said, with an unclear level of humor, that his paintings couldn't be looked at directly without risking eye injury. Turner, intentionally or not, played along. Some of his more abstract pieces, like this one of Moses writing the book of Genesis, seem to be from the perspective of someone already mostly blinded. A painting of Turner on one of his varnishing days even features shadows extending away from the painting, as if the art itself was producing natural light. Turner's influence, like his light, is hard to quantify, but one of the most direct ways he shaped art is also somewhat ironic. In 1872, a young artist viewed one of Turner's exhibitions and then went on to paint his own sun, except instead of blinding white, this painting featured a moody, orange sun viewed through a cloudy haze, the brushstrokes that formed it still clearly visible. Like Turner, this artist seemed obsessed with the light. Like Regulus, the painting seemed to show the world through new eyes. The artist, a man named Claude Monet, would offhandedly name the piece Impression Sunrise. It is the piece that gives Impressionism its name. This may be old news to you art heads, you knowledgeable about paintings folks, but it was genuinely mind-blowing to me that Impressionism is named after a single painting that encapsulates the movement. That piece is Impression Sunrise by Claude Monet, a name he gave it near accidentally in 1873 when pressed for what it was called. It's actually kind of remarkable how much we know about this painting. We know which room in the Arboretum Hotel it was painted from. We know the exact date it was painted, November 13th, 1872. We know that the sun over the Seine is viewed not through just fog, but man-made smog, new industrialization anthropocizing the air itself. And we know that in 1874, Louis Leroy published a piece in the magazine Le Charivari in which he mocked Monet and his contemporaries as displaying mere impressions, not finished work. Impression Sunrise. The name stuck. I don't want to give you a whole history of Impressionism, but something I find fascinating about the movement, especially in its historical context, is this seeming conflict at the heart of it. At a glance, these paintings often seem far less concerned with quote-unquote realism than their predecessors. Brushstrokes are clearly visible, figures often lack fine details. They are, as Leroy derisively said, impressions. And yet, simultaneously, this impressionistic gaze was said to depict the world in a more direct way, actually unburdened by preconceived ideas. Historian Michael Zimmerman frames this as not just a new style of painting, but a new way of seeing. Previous schools of art asserted that drawing contours was the most important aspect of visual representation. In prioritizing light and color instead, Impressionists often blurred the lines and contours of their work. As Zimmerman writes, the paintings were based on the light spots imprinted on the retina, and thus on pure vision. It is, perhaps, the same perspective that allows me to forgive the technical shortcomings of Zelda, the flaws in its contours, its lack of fine-grained details. It all fades when presented with that horizon. With the pure vision afforded by capturing light, it's hard to think of a more fitting subject than the sun itself, and it also explains why, while playing Tears of the Kingdom, I couldn't stop thinking about another best-looking game I've ever played, one similarly enraptured with the behavior of light: The Last Guardian. Upon release in 2016, Fumito Ueda's long-awaited follow-up to Ico and Shadow of the Colossus received attention for the design and behavior of Trico, the cat-bird-dog at the center of the story. And that attention was well-deserved. Trico is a remarkably convincing creation. I've written about it myself. But other aspects of the game's design went under-discussed in Trico's big feathery shadow, and one of those is the staggeringly beautiful approach The Last Guardian takes with the sky, and light, and darkness. Light is as core to The Last Guardian's identity as the creature, and I say this because in the original trailer, unveiled 7 full years before the game's release, the lighting was as perfectly honed as Trico's animations. Like here, in the first shot, the perfect sharpness of this light shaft falling into a cave, or when the boy runs towards the outside and through the archway is just pure white, or the way the sun slips down behind the cliff's edge. Ueda's previous efforts both also featured wonderfully harsh uses of light. The opening screen of Ico features the game's title fading in from an aggressive overexposure, and the sky of Colossus is frequently so bright it envelops the land. But it's The Last Guardian that wrings the most variety and the most emotional resonance out of its illumination. In a sharp contrast to Tears of the Kingdom, The Last Guardian refuses to even show you the sky for hours. Yes, it starts underground, but even the first several outdoor spaces are so deep beneath layers of cliff and architecture that the sky itself is reduced to a bright haze. The overarching goal of the game is simply to get out of there, escape, but the open air that represents that freedom is so abstracted, it's almost unable to be perceived. It makes the sky itself into an object of desire, its initial lack of detail driving us further upward, pushing us through the unstated need to see the sun undisguised. I'm reminded of that account of Turner painting Regulus, representing his tortured eyes with his palette of only white, driving it into all the hollows and every part of the surface. And one of the wonders of The Last Guardian is how it drives the light into hollows. The game oscillates wildly between enormous and claustrophobic spaces, and each is able to demonstrate different aspects of bright and shadow. This courtyard is gorgeous, yes, but so too is this interstice between buildings, the light deftly implying all the space beyond our vision. There are even areas of pure black, with Trico's luminous eyes as your only guide, and these make the late-game encounters with this massive glowing tower all the more unsettling, as its bright walls demonstrate properties we know regular stone should not have. But it's the exteriors that steal the show here. Once again, I'm reminded of Monet, but this time his depictions of Rouen Cathedral. He painted it over and over, the same angle in different lights, completely changing the tone and feel. Morning, evening, overcast, sunset, the facade drenched in red or blue or gray. My favorite is in direct sunlight, a time I'd have described as uninteresting until Monet makes it practically explode off the canvas, the intricacies of its construction smearing into each other in the glow. This is what the sun can do in The Last Guardian as well, illuminate and obscure at the same time, leaving the true grandeur of what you're looking at up to the imagination. Like gazing up for the first time, emotional evocation comes from not being able to see it all. And then sometimes, it just gives you everything. After so many hours of barely being able to make out the sky, the game blindsides us with it in a flashback, of all places. Trico's memory takes us where the boy cannot see, through the storm, above the clouds, and in this moment, The Last Guardian delivers an emotional yearning for the light only possible for how long it was withheld. Bright, unbearable. The shot is 6 seconds long. It stayed in my memory for as many years. It is hard to escape the irony, the almost eldritch fact that too much of an obsession with the sun can render you unable to see it at all. It's led to a whole genre of art where the theme is solar temptation, the magnetic and self-destructive pull it has. From, Icarus to Danny Boyle's 2007 masterpiece Sunshine, to wild swings like the 20th century's Robert Delaunay. Working in the wake of the Impressionists, Delaunay was a primary figure in a school called Orphism, which is sort of a bridge between cubism and abstract art. And while many of Delaunay's works are striking, it's his series of circular forms that I'm most interested in, specifically because of the Icarus-like process that took him there. His partner, an equally talented artist, Sonia Delaunay, wrote in her autobiography that with his eyes open, he looked into the fiery glow. He forced himself to stare at the midday sun until he was blinded. He then closed his eyelids and concentrated on the retinal reactions. Upon returning to the house, he arrested what he had seen with his eyes open and closed on the canvas, all the contrasts that his retina had registered. The discs are not just inspired by the sun, they are an attempt to depict our struggle to even perceive it, its unpaintability captured in images burned into our retinas. Delaunay even referenced rendering the sun as pure painting, an echo of Impressionism's pure vision, painting without the intrusion of any figure at all. Sonia Delaunay, to her credit, seemed to recognize the mythically hubristic territory they worked in. Her autobiography is titled, "We Will Go Right Up to the Sun." Some 30 years before Delaunay's discs, another group took a similar approach to the sun for a radically different purpose. In the late 1800s, astronomical photography was in its infancy, and although prints like this one by Jules Janssen are conceptually interesting, they leave a lot to be desired in terms of detail. According to astronomer Etienne Leopold Trouvelot, quote, "A well-trained eye alone is capable of seizing the delicate details of structure and of configuration of the heavenly bodies." Seeing Trouvelot's illustrations of sunspots next to period photography, it's hard to argue. Like Delaunay, albeit with a telescope and far more protective measures, Trouvelot gazed into the sun and emerged with these incredible living lithographs of its surface, its plasma dancing around absences of light. His contemporary, Wilhelm Oswald Loos, produced similarly radical illustrations. As von Saldern writes in an essay on the illustrations, because sunspots can alter their form within fractions of a second, because they require such patience and observation to capture, illustration remained the most accurate way to depict solar phenomena well into the 20th century. These hand-drawn and allegedly subjective images were often vindicated only decades later, she says, when they could be verified by modern technology. Her essay excellently highlights the talent of these illustrators, but that wording, allegedly subjective, is a funny distinction in the pursuit of capturing light. Because as accurate as these pictures are, they're missing arguably the most iconic element of their subject, the mere fact that we can look directly at them, a benevolent betrayal of their source. Straying from scientific observation into subjectivity can instead produce marvels like Troxell's Sun, a piece so explosive it makes Turner look like a minimalist, or Otto Pien, who set fire to his canvases because the world beyond the human is so powerful that the human needs a medium that transforms the power of the sun into a glow that is appropriate to a human scale, to a current whose waves are like the pulse of the heart. Or Gérard Fromanger's The Sun Floods My Canvas, which quite literally does, or Olafur Eliasson's Weather Project, which boasts actual electrical luminosity, making it both compelling and unnervingly dystopic. Both The Last Guardian and Tears of the Kingdom are games about Ascent. The former comprehensively, the latter more sporadically. And this, as much as anything, is what makes their lighting so memorable. Because their power is found in the experience of uncovering the sun, rising above the mountains or clouds to find the fire that's always been present. For instance, both the land and air en route to the Wind Temple in Zelda are consumed by a blizzard, an oppressive cloudiness that wore on my spirit as much as on Link's body temperature. Bounding up through these ships in the sky, it feels like the storm may just be an inescapable phenomenon. That is, until the very last jump, which finally catapults you above the vortex and reveals the horizon, with all its pale blues and whites and light behind the mountains. I've essentially already written an essay about The Last Guardian's transcendent final location, but it bears repeating. This sunset, on top of the cold marble tower central to the game's Ascent, is one of the single most beautiful scenes ever put in a game. The cliffside in the distance, the glow of Trico's feathers, the silhouettes lined in glimmering white. And like Zelda, half the power comes from the surprise. The fact that you've been confined to the interior of this tower makes the sun's reveal all the more powerful. I can't help but think of the story from last year in Brazil, in which over a dozen stolen paintings were found under a bed in Ipanema. The stash came from a seemingly random assortment of artists and eras. I love this one called Elevador Social by Ruben Gershme. But the biggest find was a piece called Sol Poente, or Setting Sun, by the enormously influential Brazilian artist Tarsila do Amaral. Tarsila was a pioneer of modern art in Brazil, instrumental in the history of the country's artistic identity, and here is a freaking cell phone video of someone finding one of her paintings under a bed. Even in the video, the painting holds the same incredible sense of uncovering the fire. The paper falls from the frame, and good lord, just look at that color behind it. A man off screen in disbelief says, "F***ing hell." That search for more sun, for more light, was also a primary motivator for Gothic architecture. Flying buttresses, arches, and other support systems were all developed in the pursuit of higher and thinner walls. The walls needed these innovations because they'd no longer consist of simple stone, but thousands of square feet of windows, stained glass, that would illuminate the interiors with saints and stories and the Stations of the Cross. These were some of the most architecturally ambitious structures built to that point in history. Cathedrals were on the cutting edge of technology and took decades to build. They contained single open rooms over 10 stories high, all of it designed so light would flood every inch, because windows meant light and light meant God. For over 500 years, cathedrals represented the tallest human structures ever created, their height no doubt a symbol of the church's power, but power represented by a stretch towards the sun, power in the conquest of light. It's a sense of divinity shared by a lot of world religions, but also Tears of the Kingdom's most surreal moment, the retrieval of the Master Sword. From a simple forest, courtyard, or temple, the importance of the Master Sword has now been literally elevated to stratospheric levels, Link's quest to retrieve it resulting in this image, the earth below completely vanished as he and the dragon climb through the clouds to heaven? Almost. It and the last Guardian paired in this worship of the sky, briefly removing agency to give the player space to simply marvel. Michael Howard writes that Monet's study of the Rouen Cathedral threw him into despair. He dreamed of it collapsing, its colors fluctuating in an unceasing flow. Things don't advance sensibly, Monet wrote in letters home. Everything changes, even stone. In the end, I'm trying to do the impossible. And yet, in retrospect, this is the power of each painting. In the gestural traces of movements executed with the brush, Michael Zimmerman writes, Monet expressed his own attunement, the bodily tonus of his response to the perceptions and the mood they inspired. In Impression Sunrise, in the painting that inspired the movement, Zimmerman argues this impossibility is the point. The sunrise is unique because it demonstrates that every gaze, in every moment, is unrepeatable, a fact that holds true not only for the thing seen, but also for the emotional state in which it is perceived. It's no wonder I can't get the suns of Tears of the Kingdom and The Last Guardian out of my head then, not just because of their singular beauty, but because each game sculpts both the horizon and my emotional experience leading to it, the light filling and overflowing the bounds of the screen, the sun floods my canvas, too bright to take in, too resonant to lose sight of. I close my eyes, and I can still see the glow. The sun wasn't the only thing Impressionists painted, obviously. Portraits are great, plants are lovely, but here's what I'm really interested in. These incredible-looking galettes painted by Monet in 1882. A while ago, I made a video attempting to follow Wanted Dead's deranged lasagna recipe. Now I'm back with a new and potentially much more delicious challenge, baking pastries based on foundational works of Impressionism, maybe even finding the sun in a rustic pie crust.
Wow, that looks beautiful, I think.
I believe it was made by, oh my god, these pages are so good.
This half-hour baking adventure is available exclusively on Nebula, a creator-owned streaming platform now chock full of experiments like this from me. So, hey, cooking video not your thing? How about the recording of a live talk I gave, or a review and critique of one of my college papers, or a full-on essay on the failed space weapons of the US military? Nebula is home to all these things and more. And I'm not just a guy who puts stuff on Nebula, I watch videos there constantly, because some of my favorite creators upload exclusive videos, extended cuts, or even fully featured classes, and I know that my subscription to Nebula does way more than a YouTube view ever will in terms of supporting my favorite people. The bonus is, you can do all this, and it's still super cheap. When you follow my link in the description, you can sign up for Nebula for just over $2 a month. That is, in my humble opinion, a steal to see if my homemade pie crust actually turns out, to see if Monet was onto something with this choice of dessert. Also, I still talk about video games and art and stuff, of course. I can't be stopped. Follow the link in the description to get a special deal on signing up for Nebula, and check out the hours and hours of videos you've been missing.